So as most of you guys probably know by now, I have been covering pretty much every single bit of Richmond news that you possibly can be. Like, especially to do with the draft, I have been trying to stay on top of that 24/7, and we constantly hear new news every single week to do with the draft, and that really hasn't been anything different with Richmond so far in 2025, because the overall 2025 draft continuously changes. Like, it has been changing so much, and the projections on where players are going to go also changes every week. And I think for at least the last month or two, it has kind of been pretty solidified on like the three players most people thought Richmond were going to be looking at, which happened to be Sullivan Roby, Sam Grill, and Sam Cumming. They have been the three players that pretty much everyone and their dad has been talking about in terms of being linked to Richmond. But ever since the, I think, finals with the Eastern Rangers and some of the players who have played with them, I think a lot of the draft projections have changed, especially considering some of those players dominated. Again, we know that Sullivan Roby's draft stocks dramatically increased since the finals, and a couple other blokes here and there, their draft stocks have also increased. But one guy who has really, I think, increased to a point now where it has been reported by multiple people that Richmond are not only considering him as a player they're going to pick, but it seems like he's now in the favourite for as well. And that does happen to be, of course, Xavier Taylor, who did get best of field in the grand final for the Eastern Rangers, having a really impressive 25 disposal and 15 mark game. Really, really insane effort. Of course, this has been talked about a little bit more and more now as the weeks have gone on, that Richmond have been linked to him. We know in the most recent episode of Gettable, at the time making this video, Cal Toomey, of course, did actually mention the four most likely players that Richmond are considering with pick 3 and 4. And he did say Xavier Taylor's name. This was one of the first times now we truly saw Xavier Taylor actually linked to Richmond. And then ever since then, we've just had 996 different reports. We are getting one now from Tiger Faithful that does say, draft rumor, Xavier Taylor is being strongly linked to Richmond. The diehard Tiger supporter was best of field in the Coates grand final. This is pretty massive because he's a big surprise. He's not the type of guy that I think a lot of people thought Richmond were going to be going after. But we got to remember, at the time of making this video, Xavier Taylor is currently ranked higher as a player than what Sam Cumming is, than what Sam Grill is, and literally every single other player that has been linked to Richmond other than Sullivan Roby at this point. Because when you actually do look at the rankings and you take away all the academy players and whatnot who we know Richmond can't get, if you take all that into consideration and you take away Dersman and Cooper Duff Tyler, who people are saying are almost locks now to go to the Eagles, Xavier Taylor is about the second or third best ranked player, counting in all those factors on most people's draft boards, literally just behind Sullivan Roby. So the reason I feel like Xavier Taylor has kind of been a surprise and has been someone that Richmond fans I think have dramatically overshadowed is just based on the fact that Xavier Taylor is not a midfielder, he's not a forward, he's not a ruckman. In fact, he plays the position that you could argue is the only one that Richmond don't basically need to draft, and that is backman. Because as we know, Richmond's backline in 2025 was, quite frankly, incredible. It was very, very good. Like, I would say Richmond's forward line, midfield, and bench interchange was probably bottom two for most of the year. But in terms of the backline, I think a lot of people can agree that the backline was one of the better ones in the game. Like, I genuinely think with how much the ball was down there, I'm surprised Richmond didn't have 150 points scored on them every game, because I feel like most teams over the history, if the ball was down there as much as it was with Richmond this year, that probably would have happened. But the backline was so goddamn goated that it was able to hold up to the point where it was a massive anchor being on Richmond winning multiple games this year, considering we literally were tipped to win no games by a lot of experts out there. Now, was Richmond's backline a top 8 in 2025? In my opinion, yes, I think it was a top 8 quality backline. I think a lot of people who watched Richmond's backline would also agree on that. So this is where it becomes interesting, because Xavier Taylor is a backman, and technically Richmond don't need to go there. But that's only one side of the coin. We got to look at the other side of the coin, that this is only technically Richmond's second year at the draft in the rebuild. And usually, for the first couple years of most rebuilds for most teams out there who are quite obviously a bottom 3 club, usually the teams go best available. And I believe that is what Richmond could be doing right here. It's also like, we got to remember, teams don't just draft for the now. Teams also, and in Richmond's case, mainly draft for the future. If we look at it right now, Richmond's backline is, yes, a top 8, and I think most Richmond fans' minds. But if you look at it, Nathan Broad has already said in a podcast previously that he expects 2026 will be his last year, meaning he'll be retiring and won't be on the team, obviously going forward. You've also got Nick Floston and Jane Short, who are now going into their 30s and are in well and truly the later parts of their career, even though Nick Floston still plays like he's freaking Superman half the time. I mean, he's still in his 30s, so he probably won't be around in the next 5 years, or at least I think. When you take into the fact that in 5 years' time, those 3 blokes probably won't be on the team, we still have some question marks about Josh Gibcus. Is he going to be the backman we all hope he will be? We know that Tyler Young recently just left the team. And we, of course, know as well that Luke Traynor did play the second half of the year of wing in 2025. And even though he said in an interview he wants to play back again in 2026, that's no guarantee that Uze shares the same thought that he does. When you take into all those factors, you really do realize that, hold on, drafting Xavier Taylor would actually be a very good decision. And there's really no negatives when you actually take into factor that even though Richmond's backline has been a top 8 for this last season, it is actually quite an experienced and older backline compared to the rest of the Richmond team, which is really young. Like, especially comparing it to the forward line, which has an average age of like freaking 19 in there. The backline is pretty old, and I definitely feel like with all of those players who will be most likely retiring and leaving over the next 5 years, going best available here, if you think that is Xavier Taylor, makes complete, most amount of sense. And the thing is that people don't exactly understand who Xavier Taylor is. They see that he's a 191 centimeter defender, and they just think, oh, because of that, he's going to be like the third tall down there, and that's all he's going to do. When in reality, Xavier Taylor's comparison by a lot of draft experts out there has actually been a little bit of a Josh Weddle, just because of his speed and potential burst on the backline, which I genuinely believe Richmond need. Like, one of the only faults about Richmond's backline is there's not a lot of run and carry off there at all. And you can tell we really miss having like a Liam Baker or a Basher Hooley off that backline. And there just isn't really someone filling in that void. And this is 2025. I don't care that Xavier Taylor is 191 centimeters and tall, right? I know that the prototypical halfback who's been able to run and dash and add speed off the back line has been like 180 to 186 centimeters. I know that is the truth, but this is 2025 now, where the AFL is completely changing and you are having players of all different shapes and sizes do their thing. Like, you look at Josh Weddle. Josh Weddle is almost nearly the quickest halfback in the game. Is he 180 to 185 centimeters tall? No, he's well over 190 centimeters tall. You look at Liam Baker, who's 173 centimeters tall. This bloke legitimately plays sometimes like you think he's over 6 foot, with the amount he's crashing into blokes twice his size and really throwing his body around. It just shows you that you can't look at a bloke's height to really paint the whole entire picture. And Xavier Taylor can do more than just being like that third option, you know, down there as the 191 centimeter. He can defend small, he can defend tall, he can also run and dash. And I think he could be a really good addition to this Richmond team. And if Richmond are going to go best available, which would technically be Sullivan Roby and Xavier Taylor, I would not be disappointed with that at all. And I mean, hey, it moves Lukey Traynor up the ground a little bit more. I like him on the wing. I think Richmond really need wing depth as well, so I'm not opposed to that. And just imagine bringing in your new 191 centimeter halfback down one end at like pick 4, and then at pick 3 you got Sullivan Roby, the 193 centimeter high half forward / mid. I could really see that happening, and I'm very interested to see if that is the direction Richmond are going to go. But it's definitely a surprise. We didn't really see this coming, but when you logically think about it, it actually makes a whole lot of sense for Richmond to do this. Will they? I'm not too sure. You know, they could still think that Cumming or Grell is maybe better. But technically on the best available draft board, that would be Xavier Taylor. So it's going to be interesting to see how Richmond go about this on draft night, how their boards stack up against, you know, some others. It's going to be really cool because not every team agrees. Not everyone is going to agree with, you know, the Phantom Form Guide just because he is, you know, super highly rated on all these draft guides. Doesn't mean Richmond agree. I think they might. We'll have to wait and see. Again, this is a lot of a guessing game, really. So that's why it's going to be awesome to see when the draft comes around. Again, I'd most importantly, though, love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this down below. Do you think the Tigers will select Xavier Taylor, or do you guys think they won't? Again, I'd very much like to know. Subscribe to the channel for latest sports content and news. My gaming / movie channel will also be getting linked down below. Go check that out. And go give me a follow on Instagram if you haven't already, which will be linked down below. But yeah, as I was saying, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.